Hello, and welcome back to the Skeptic Track. Thank you so much for joining us. This afternoon we have Celestia Ward, who is a very, very good friend of the track and of me. And she is a caricature artist, a writer, editor, podcaster, everything. She does everything. So please welcome Celestia Ward.
Hello, beautiful nerds. All right, my name is Celestia. I'm going to teach you some stuff, hopefully. I'm going to take you on a wild ride about creativity, learning how to draw, learning how to critical think, media literacy, facial recognition, and talk about how all this works together. Now, how many here are a little bit panicked about AI? You didn't think the topic was going to start with that. A lot of working artists I know are worried that AI is going to steal all our jobs. Oh my God, if the machines can draw, we won't be necessary anymore. And a worry that I have, and that some peers of mine have in the dare I say, upper echelons of working artists, is if kids are able to generate an image with a prompt, hopefully, will kids still want to learn how to draw, to go through the long way around the process of learning how to draw? And if you think about it financially, to be very Machiavellian here, if kids stop learning how to draw, financially that would be great for me. If suddenly I had a skill set that fewer and fewer people had, I would become a rare and exotic beast that could charge twice my rate to draw pictures like real, organic, handmade pictures. But that's not why I'm concerned about that. I think learning how to draw, or at least trying, giving a good college try to learn how to draw, is better for every individual person and for society as we work together. So on that note, does everybody here know what a bicycle looks like? Have you ever seen one? Have you ever ridden a bicycle? I want you to draw a bicycle. Now you can take out a scrap of paper, pen if you have it, write it on the back of one of your $100 autographs. Or you could use your phone if you want to use the note thing, but do not Google what a bicycle looks like. You are cheating if you Google bicycle and do an image search. You have to draw it from memory for these purposes here. In the meantime, I'll tell you who the hell I am. You could charitably call this multidisciplinary, or you could suggest I have undiagnosed ADHD, but I've been a live studio caricature artist for the past 32 years, which means I draw at corporate events and parties. Somebody sits down and I draw you in like 3 minutes. And yes, I have been a carny. It's a lot of fun. My background educationally is actually I got a Bachelor of Arts in Writing Seminars and Psychology at Johns Hopkins. And I really got into the rods and cones and the perception part of psychology, but I picked it up a little too late to major in it, so I got a minor. From there, I became an academic editor at Johns Hopkins University Press, learned how bookmaking works, read a ton of dissertations, and turned them into marketable English that average people could read. And I went into full-time cartooning in 2002, because I ran away and joined the circus, because I'd been doing caricatures nights and weekends. And in 2018, I began a podcast called Squaring the Strange. And I have swag, free swag. And then during the pandemic, when live events disappeared off the face of the earth, I fell back on my earlier skill set and took on a job in communications. And I now also do PR and editing for a communications firm. So that's what I do, and I'm going to bring some of that all together here. One of the things I have noticed over the years is that a lot of my friends in the, again, dare I say, higher echelons of working caricature artists. I've been going to the International Society of Caricature Artists conventions for 25 years. I've been on the board. I've won a few awards. A lot of my friends have won awards. All the people who are in the higher, the real serious workaday artists, a lot of these people are skeptics. And I'm like, is that just a coincidence? Do I turn off all the artists that are not skeptics? Do they just not want to be friends with me? Or am I just meeting really good artists who are also skeptical? And I started looking at that. First, some basics, Hyman's principle, you got to define it before you You've got to make sure it exists and everything before you examine it closely. What is creativity? This is Steve Brodner. He's a brilliant political cartoonist and caricature artist. I've taken his course at the School of Visual Arts. To him, it's a very workmanlike process. There's this notion that like creativity lives over here with unicorns and rainbows and cotton candy. And engineers work here with rulers and calculators. And the analytical and the creative are not so far apart. If you've fallen into the right brain, left brain idea, forget about it. That's a whole nother presentation. That's a bit of a myth. To him, you got to analyze all the elements. You got to rearrange them. You got to literally do like 100 versions of a drawing before you get something that you can pass along to the art director. In other words, it's not magic. And I am surprised at how many people, the vast majority of average, everyday people, walk up to me and think I'm magic because I have taught myself how to draw. I shouldn't even say taught myself because I've learned from very good people over the years how to draw. And you have to be born that way. Oh, you're blessed. Oh, I wish I could draw. And that sounds to me like I wish I could bake a cake, but I'm not willing to read any recipe books or try it. So let's see here. Another person I'm going to draw on here is Alex Raffi. He's the creative director of the firm that I work for. And oddly enough, he was a caricature artist for about 2 months. He got out of it like in his teens because he said it was too hard. But he brilliant guy. He lectures on creativity across the country. He's talked to some really big corporations about what creativity is. And it is problem solving. He has this notion where you can think of everything you learn as a token. Like the color red is a token. Words are tokens. Everything you learn is a token, and you can rearrange them in different ways. And the way that you learn how to rearrange these is creativity. You can make a recipe, a joke, a mural. Creativity is involved in everything. And again, I'll repeat it on the bottom there. Creativity is problem solving. So we have our definition here, and let's think of a problem. Derek's face. Derek's face is going to be our problem. The reason I'm choosing Derek Colanduno's face is because skeptics love optical illusions, but they're always abstract. It's like, oh, look at this vortex, and oh, now you see the purple dots look blue, and nobody drives down the street and is confronted with these optical illusions. It would be a very different road, to handle. But we look at faces every day. We just don't understand what we're being tricked with when we look at faces. So if anybody was here for the astronauts talk, Katie Coleman, she showed a photo of like 5 of them in space, and like 2 of them were upside down. And she's like, well, you see, you can't really even recognize Vladimir there because he's upside down. And I'm like, I can totally recognize Vladimir. But you're not used to seeing somebody upside down. So your face doesn't register the likeness as well because your brain is trained a certain way. So non-artists often tell me, oh, do you trace? I mean, that's how you get this, you would get the most accurate result you could get from drawing would be tracing, right? Okay, let's try that out. Let's experiment that. We've got, let's trace Derek's face. Or rotoscope it if we work for Disney. And that's what we get. And I mean, it doesn't not look like Derek, but it doesn't jump out and scream, this is Derek. So what I do as a caricature artist is I lie about people's faces in a more believable way. So I will just run through it. Let me see if I can play this as a video here. I squish top of his head, I make his eyes a little bit more beady, move him in because that makes the nose look bigger and he's got kind of a broad nose, and I lift the shoulders up and make him look a little bit more bulky and everything, and then I fill in the ink, and it's very different from the tracing. It is not what is actually there if you look at the line work of Derek's face, but you end up with a result that many people see as a better likeness. And they've done some experiments. I, of course, didn't pull any of them and get you references, but you could look these up. People, when shown a rotoscoped portrait, I can't even call it a portrait because portrait artists do this too. They deviate a little bit from the actual line work. If people shown a flat drawing like I showed you before, and then shown a caricature, they recognize the caricature a lot faster. And I threw some color in there too because I wanted to spiffy it up here. So now there's an artist named Joe Teller. He worked in the middle of the 20th century and throughout. And he's got a neat book out. In art, if it looks right, it is right, was his mantra. And he was teaching a student, and the student pulled out a ruler and wanted to like draw some straight lines to do a table. And he's like, no, you don't ever use a ruler. If you're doing it, you got to make sure it just looks right. It doesn't have to be straight. If it looks straight, you've accomplished the purpose in artwork. Because every artist who's worth their salt knows that it's not just about accurate representation. It's about working with the perception of your viewer. What are people going to see this as? Not necessarily what is it. What are people going to see this as? He has a son. He actually married another commercial artist, and the two of them were very prolific, did a lot of commercial work. He did a lot of abstract paintings toward the end of his life, and his child got into a profession that also deals with perception, but in a different way. And as a little side brag here, I got to draw caricatures at Teller's father's birthday years ago. It may have been his last birthday, but he and his wife Irene were both there. Very adorable elderly people, and they absolutely loved. I used to be nervous drawing for other artists, but I have learned over the years they appreciate the work more than anybody. They understand it's not magic. They know the process of building the skills. And these are not people who will see Jesus in their grilled cheese sandwich. They're pretty good at not spotting, at not being fooled by optical illusions, or understanding why their brain is fooled. Now I'm going to show you a couple of quick illusions that I use in just drawing people at the state fair. Some caricature illusions. Now, first. Teeth are hard to draw. Hate teeth. Occasionally you can get away with not drawing the teeth at all. If it's a smaller drawing, if you're drawing a bunch of people on the paper, you don't have to show anything. If you do draw the lines, they start looking like gravestones or Tic Tacs. And they're ugly and yeah. So Tom Richmond, who wrote the book on caricatures called The Mad Art of Caricature, you can get it at Amazon. It's like $20. I pimp it because I played a hand in writing it. I told Tom, write this book and I will edit it for you for free. Because again, I worked as an academic publisher. And he wrote it. He told me he'd only sell like 100 copies, maybe, and it's on its 11th printing and has sold 30,000 copies. So I remind him of that every time I talk to him. So he calls this implied line. Tom Richmond is an excellent trainer of caricature artists. And he said, what you want to do is you want to let their brain do the work. Draw their gum line, and then draw the bottom of the tooth like a stalactite and a stalagmite. You don't have to have them touch. Don't have them like this. But have them so they're almost touching, and in the end they fade out. And he calls it the implied line. And that makes the teeth look a little more wet. And your mind does the work to understand it as separate teeth, but not Tic Tacs. So, or if your model has teeth that are really far apart and look like Tic Tacs, go ahead, I don't care. The other thing is babies. Oh, the caricature artist's nightmare. Babies are hard to draw, and they smell bad and vomit a lot. So usually when I was working at a caricature stand with a bunch of other caricature artists, and somebody comes up with a baby, it's like, you. So let's take a look at a standard baby and why they look like aliens. Their faces are all squished. They don't have the proportions that you learn in an art book where it's like 5 eyeballs across and a half line. And it would look bizarre if you put those proportions on a baby. And they're soft and squishy. And then they grow up a little bit, and little kids are also hard to draw. They're still soft and squishy, but not as much. They're starting to get a little more. If you put them together here, you can kind of see the slight differences. No, they're not different at all. That's the same face. Ha ha. What makes them look different is I gave one a neck, and I didn't give the other one a neck because babies don't have necks. Their heads sit on their shoulders like a boulder on a bowl of Jell-O. And I've seen so many beginner artists draw a pretty decent drawing of a baby face, but then they give it a neck and they instantly kill the likeness. And people, how's that happen? Because, the face is still the face, but once your brain sees the neck on it, you think that's a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, or that's not a baby. The little baby hands help too, the little So yeah, that's another way that I've learned, okay, I have to work with the brains that people have, not abide by some accurate representation. So, I've gone ahead of myself here. Okay. So let's see here. The third problem is, smiles. Smiles are hard to draw. I've literally taken all-day seminars about smiles. There's fake smiles, there's real smiles. And I'm gonna tell a little story here about teaching my brother how to draw caricatures, which was a short-lived endeavor. Both my brothers are engineers. And engineers appreciate accuracy. But it's not like he couldn't draw. He actually showed ability at an early age, but then he just veered off into something that could make him money. So he drew a picture from a photograph, and I'm like, okay, good job. Let me show you how to make that look a little bit more like her. So I took this, and one of the things I did is I put this line under the eye. So you can see that the cheeks are being pushed up when she smiled. And my brother looked at it and he said, but that's not on the photo. I said, no, it's not. And he said, but it looks more like her now. I said, yes, it does. And his little engineering mind went, he said, you just drew something that wasn't on the photograph and you made it look more like the photograph. How did that I'm like, yes. Because you have to accommodate our preconceptions with if you take away that little line, it doesn't look like as much of a natural smile because we are so used to all the millions and millions and millions and millions of faces we've seen. Oh, you missed something, Derek.
What did I miss?
The problem with your face.
So you'll have to watch the YouTube stream.
Oh, no.
So we have seen millions and millions and millions of people smiling at us or frowning at us, or depending on how engaging you are with other people. And we have this idea of what expressions mean, and expressions are so important. And you'll recognize, some of you may recognize this catalog here of expressions. It was created in the 1970s by Paul Ekman and some of his associates. Ekman had a lot of ideas that are kind of fringy and the micro expressions. Who remembers that show Lie to Me? Yeah, I don't recommend you freeze frame people to see whether or not they're lying. That's I don't think there's much to that. If I recall correctly, the debunkings I've read. But there are some rules about what expressions mean. And it makes sense that our brains are really, really good at understanding and getting data from these expressions. They've been important to our survival. If you know anybody who's neurodivergent and has really a lot of trouble reading expressions, you can ask them how much trouble it causes in their life. It can cause quite a bit of trouble. Katie, and I wouldn't say your life is going to depend on reading expressions, but Katie Coleman, the astronaut, in her talk yesterday, she showed a picture of one of the Russian astronauts who was like, and she's like, yeah, this is him happy. And when you think about it, and she said that it made her a little nervous to approach him with ideas and stuff. And when you think about that, astronauts, pilots, etc., you have to be really comfortable with hey, I've got an idea. Hey, I noticed this thing. And if you feel like your superior is, that could have a life-saving effect if you can understand, okay, that face is actually a happy face. I can approach him and talk to him about this thing. So, that just struck me when she said that, as like, okay, that's an example where expressions of emotion are vitally important. And of course, animators use this catalog all the time. You'll recognize disgust. I saw like 3 or 4 disgusts out there. Did you guys see how many Pixar people were walking around? It's pretty cool. All right, so, all right, no, yeah. If you recognize this person, shut up. I'm going to show you a quick image, and I'm going to show you how photographs can lie a little bit. Some fans might recognize this real quick. But I know you recognize this faster. Because Snoop doesn't always have his eyes wide open like that. It's not his signature expression. People really associate expression with likeness. And whenever somebody says, if I'm drawing a person live or whatever, whenever they say, oh, you really captured his essence, invariably what they mean is you really captured his expression. And expressions are, if we're used to seeing, have you ever seen a photograph of yourself and it just doesn't look like you? It's because you're making an expression that you don't normally look like. And comedians and impersonators use this all the time. Trump is a fantastic example of somebody who, he's got a lot of key expressions that comedians have. I think Alec Baldwin just got acquitted, didn't he? Lucky guy. Okay. So that's Baldwin doing the Trump smug face. And I did the same sort of thing. I drew him for a comic panel, and that was what I did. And you got to focus on the expression, which is why we get really irritated. I just this morning on the way down the elevator, I got on a little caricature forum I'm on, I got somebody throwing out a photo. Occasionally we make fun of people where they're like, yeah, the client sent me this photo and said, make him angry and holding a knife or something. And the guy was like, and take off his glasses. The guy had sunglasses over half his face and was going, it's like, no, I can't draw that from that. It's not going to work. So yeah, also this happens with family resemblances. Have you ever had anybody say, oh my God, when you make that face, you look just like your mom? It's your expressions are bringing things out here. So, and this is, I don't even have to make a sound to tell you who this person is impersonating. In your voice, you're hearing, are you looking at me? Or if you're of a later generation, how do you milk a cat? This is what is his name? Justin Bartha doing what he calls De Niro face. Now, what if the expression somebody has is super extreme? This young woman is Carly Soto, and this is her in 2012. She was in that moment when the photojournalist took her picture. She was trying to find out if her sister was still alive. Her sister was one of the educators at the Sandy Hook shooting. And yes, her face is stretched out. She's expressing an extreme emotion. And conspiracy believers grabbed that photo and searched it with a bunch of other photos of young women expressing the same emotion and came to the conclusion that this must be the same person going from tragedy to tragedy and pretending to be a bereaved relative. Crisis actors is one of the, Alex Jones had a big hand in promoting this conspiracy. And to me, these don't look like the same people, but there's a couple of factors at play. Again, we have the expression, also the fact that hairstyles, how you trim your eyebrows, how you do your makeup, all comes into and out of fashion. So at any given stretch of like a 5-year period, you're going to have a lot of young women doing their hair the same, doing their makeup the same, doing their eyebrows the same. And then they're also in the low data zone. Everything's 72 DPI on your screen. these are not, I would never draw a caricature of any of these people or a portrait of any of these people from one of these photos, because you zoom in and you just have, they look like Minecraft people. They're all pixelated. So just like somebody looks at a smudge on a picture of the woods and says, it's Bigfoot, says, can't you see Sasquatch is right there? They see the similarities and say, their gut says that this is the same person. Now, this is not just from Sandy Hook and school shootings. It's going on now with the trouble in Gaza and Middle East. These are two different people, Salah Al-Jafarawa and Mohammed Zendik. They are two different people, two different ages in two different places. And they don't necessarily have the same expression, but they're at a different angle. And I mean, one of them is only 16. The other one, the thing that I notice is like, my God, that guy's got such hairy arms, and this other person has no body hair. That's not the same person. Yeah. But they're also, as the people who these conspiracy memes target are usually Westerners, usually not brown Westerners. And you have that effect. Unfortunately, our brains have a factory setting where we're better at recognizing people of our own ethnicity. We see somebody of another ethnicity and we're like, oh, they all look alike. You know, that old trope, it does have some unfortunate neurological backing that you've got to overcome. And so this Palestinian blogger was, anyway, you know where that goes. So let me see here. So skeptics who study this type of meme and this type of thinking, media literacy is so important to skeptics of all stripes. And again, I'm going to call on the talk that the astronaut Katie Coleman did yesterday. She was a little frustrated that the media keeps using the words stranded in space. That word stranded sounds a whole lot worse than, we made a scheduling change, everything's fine. If there was an emergency, somebody could come down, but we're just going to wait a little while. But the word stranded sells a lot more papers, magazines, and gets more clicks. And pictures are also a type of sellable commodity on a story. And editors choose pictures. And editors know that people, we are empathetic social creatures. We key in on seeing another person experience something. When you're a photojournalist, if you want to get a Pulitzer Prize winning photo, you don't take a photo of the burning building, period. You take a photo of somebody reacting to the burning building, somebody whose face captures the, I've just lost everything or you know, our town is being bombed, or you need to see a face reacting to it. And so the vast majority right now of us consume our news over a smartphone or some sort of screen, and we click through it. And oftentimes we are just reading the headline and the photograph. And both of those can deceive you. Now I'm going to put this next slide up, and I don't want to hear grumbling from half the room, I hope. I'm not here to discuss complicated rules, complicated biology, or complicated social issues. I'm here to talk faces. And I saw a face. I saw a couple of images of this face, and I am, as a person who draws people from photographs, I was like, those photographs are there's something about these photographs. These are deceptive photographs. This is, you'll recognize Imana Khalif, the gold medal award-winning female boxer from Algeria, and editors were putting these photos up to make to complement the headline, you know, gender, controversy, blah blah blah, da, 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 da. And I'm looking at the photos of this woman, and I'm like, okay, these are taken from a low angle. There's a reason why when women want to look, you know, very demure, very mindful. Who here takes a selfie like this? I dare you to see what you look like if you take a photo like this and get some Olympic level lighting on your face too at the same time. And while you're at it, be at the most amped up moment in your life with every muscle in your body tensing up, and have some shadows in there. And this is what you look like. And these were spread all over the place. And I saw people reacting to them, and they were like, that's a man. And I was like, well, have you read the backstory? Have you read, what? No, but you can tell that's a man. And their bias was just jumping to the forefront because they saw these pictures of her face. And I had to dig for these photos. These are different photos with different lighting. And I mean, she still looks like a female jock, but this looks more like an Algerian Jamie Lee Curtis to me. She looks a little butch, but she could be your auntie. And I purposely found photos where she doesn't have any makeup on, because the other photos she didn't have any makeup on. But here we have, her expression is different. She is next to the male referee right there, where you can sort of see the size difference, and suddenly she doesn't look gigantic. She looks a little diminutive there. And I wish more of these photos had gone out with the original stories, but it wouldn't have sold as many papers. So that's just something to bear in mind. Now, photos lie, and ironically, if you search this woman's name now, Khalif, Imana Khalif, the story has flip-flopped. Now the photos you find, she's in full makeup with pink flowery clothing, and the headlines are, Imana Khalif unveils brand new feminine makeover. And in my mind, I'm, again, lots of skepticism years and lots of artistic years, I'm like, okay, so they're basically telling you the story is, hey, we lied to you before. We deceptively showed you a lot of photos and put a lot of headlines together that said, yeah, you think you see an Adam's apple there, right? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And speaking of things and then now the story is, well, now let's take a look at it from this point of view. So, speaking about seeing Adam's apples that aren't really there, we're going to talk about pareidolia. I don't know if I have to explain what pareidolia is to any of the people who've come to like a million Skeptics tracks, but pareidolia is seeing patterns in something that's not really there. It's a type of apophenia. Wikipedia has an amazing page on pareidolia, and it goes through the neurological process of what your brain does. And this right here, this is a photo of the face on Mars, which made headlines in the 70s because it looked like there was a face on Mars. Oh my gosh, they're building, this is a buried statue. No, it was a few rocks and the way that the shadows were and the way that the low resolution, the low data zone made this look like a face. If you can go online and see updated photos and you can see the rocks and see what's going on. But our brains do it so quickly. There's a facial fusiform area, and they've hooked people up to fMRIs, and we show them a Volkswagen Beetle that looks kind of like a face. Our brains don't take a moment and say, that's a Volkswagen Beetle. That's, okay, that's a car. Oh, it has two headlights. Hey, those two headlights kind of look like a face. And then we retcon it into thinking, looks like a face. Our brains just immediately go, that's a face. So, I mean, I love pareidolia. As a working cartoonist, I would not earn $1 if it weren't for the fact that our brains have pareidolia. And skeptics love the term. Artists have known about it forever. This is Leonardo da Vinci. If you look at any walls spotted with various stains or with a mixture of different kinds of stones, you will be able to see in it a resemblance to various different landscapes adorned with mountains, rivers, rocks, trees, plains, wide valleys, blah, 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 blah. And an infinite number of things which you can then reduce into separate and well-conceived forms. Now, I don't know if he was on drugs when he wrote this, but I myself, not on any drugs, as a 14-year-old, looking up at the popcorn ceiling in my bedroom, I'm sure you've seen, that kind of looks like a face. Oh, that looks like a demon. Oh, that looks like a fairy. Oh, And we in the caricature business, when I work with a bunch of other artists at a fair, one of the exercises you do to loosen yourself up and get out of the constrictions of just like the proportions of a regular head is you draw just some random squiggles, and then you pass it to your friend, and they try to find the faces in it. And it really sort of stretches your creative muscles into, okay, I'm gonna make these faces, and I'm gonna make them not look like people, but look like people, and it makes you a better cartoonist, I think. Anyway, I keep going way past my notes here. I apologize. All right, so anyway, if you're a young artist who doesn't think you know what you're doing, this is a great exercise. And speaking about being a young artist who doesn't know what they're doing, the Dunning-Kruger effect. I've defined it here, but many of you, if you're skeptics, you know what it is. And again, this is a thing that artists understand if you've been working in the business for a while. When I worked with many other artists, somebody would come to the stand and be like, I'd like to get better. I'm not really good at this yet, but I love what you do, and I keep watching, and I'm trying to get better. And could you look at my portfolio and tell me what I'm doing wrong? Automatically, we know. Okay, this person's probably pretty good. If we get somebody come up to the booth, yo, I can draw really good. I've been drawing since I was a little kid. I've been really good since I was a little kid. Blah blah blah, and they tell us how great they are. Chance it's a red flag. We know, okay, this person's really good at hyping themselves up, but they probably can't draw a stick figure. And I have seen that come to pass. So what you can do, now Dunning-Kruger is really easy to understand in relation to other people. It's really hard to understand in relation to yourself. And it's really hard to convince somebody who is just graduated from the Dunning-Kruger, university and is convinced that they are right, is convinced that they, with no experience, knows more than the scientist. It's hard to convince them that look, you are ignorant, and they're like, that's not going to have an effect. So you can either send them to school, pay for their grad school, get them through 12 years of postdoc work, and get them to the point where they look back and say, back when I made that comment on Facebook, I really didn't know what I was talking about. Or you can set up a still life. And I've seen people just unravel how they thought they were good at something, or they thought they knew what something looked like in the course of 2 hours of trying to draw a small piece of a still life. And I'm not talking about like, oh, it's art time in kindergarten, let's get crayons and draw our feelings. I'm talking about like a really hard, like look at this. I'm getting PTSD look at the stripes and the shines and clearly the artist gave up. They got to those sparkles there and they just did a white spider. They're like, I'm done. And after you go through this process and you have a good instructor who teaches you, okay, yeah, you think that looks like that, but look closer. Look closer. What really does it look like? Then you put your work up on the board with everybody else, and you realize that you suck really bad and everybody else is a little bit better than you, or you just see that everybody sucks. And this is one of my favorite quotes from Edward Degas. Painting is very easy when you don't know how, and very difficult when you do. And if you, he's such a sad, it's such a sad self-portrait, and I think it shows you he knows that sad truth about doing artwork is that you're never really happy with your work because you're always learning more. And so you look back at something and I get a lot of people who are like, oh, you drew me at the party 2 years ago. Let me show you what you drew. God, no. Please, I don't want to see that. Or they ask, oh, you must have your artwork up all over the walls at your house. No. So now, as a working artist who does parties and events, and I draw people in all sorts of environments, it's kind of like being a real artist, but while I draw, I get drunk people watching me. And they share their feelings. And I didn't do this. I'm a little nicer than this, even to drunk hecklers, but a friend of mine did this. Friend of a friend's story, if you know folklore. But I know this guy, he really freaking did this. This woman comes up probably 5 wine glasses deep into her evening, and she's like, that doesn't look like him. I could do that. That doesn't look like him. And he simply took the marker and handed it to her and motioned to his chair. And again, 5 wine glasses into her evening, she's like, yeah, I can do this. She sits down, she took the marker, she made about like 2 strokes on the paper and then burst into tears and ran away. She left the party. And she had just been Dunning-Krugered so hard and made to be aware of her ignorance so quickly that it was like a whiplash effect. And this is a painful process that anybody who really learns how to draw seriously understands. And now, Ira Glass, he's a radio person, NPR guy, Ira Glass. I love his, look it up and hear it in his voice, but he talks about the creativity gap. And I'm going to read, I hate people who just, well, I hate people, again, I'm going way past my stuff here. It's not fun to watch somebody just read up here, but I'm going to read a little bit more because there was more than I wanted you to hear about this particular notion about the creativity gap. Nobody tells this to people who are beginners. I wish someone told me. All of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste. But there is a gap. For the first couple of years you make stuff, it's just not that good. It's trying to be good. It has potential, but it's not. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is why your work disappoints you. A lot of people never get past this phase. They quit. Most people I know who do interesting creative work went through years of this. We know our work doesn't have this special thing that we just want it to have. We all go through this. And if you are just starting out, or if you're still in this phase, you got to know it's normal, and the most important thing you can do is a lot of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week you will finish one story. It is only by going through a volume of work that you will ever close this gap, and your work will be as good as your ambitions. And I took longer to figure this out than anyone I've ever met. It's going to take a while. It's normal to take a while. You've just got to fight your way through. And that's really inspiring, and it should give people hope. And this is why when people are looking for a hobby, they're like, oh, I tried this and I wasn't good at it. Oh, I tried that, I wasn't good at it. And I've had mothers drag their kids away from my booth and say, don't try to learn. You have to be born knowing how to do that. And I've literally argued with one. I was like, no. The way you get good at it is by looking and by learning, and nobody's good when they're born. So the one quibble I would have with the way that Ira expresses this here is that he says your ambition meets your ability. And like, oh, and then you're happy. No, you're just like Edward Degas all sad here. You never get there with artwork. You always will be like, you learn how to perceive a little bit better, and then your work gets better. And then you learn how to perceive a little bit better, and then your work gets better. And you're always just, yeah. So expect that. Don't be expecting to be the most happy artist in the world if you learn how to draw. Now, speaking of being happy little artists, take a look at your bicycles that you have hopefully been drawing while I've been doing this. This is what an actual bicycle looks like. Did you remember that? If you didn't, you don't have to tell us. It can be your own secret shame. But this is a psychologist, Rebecca Lawson. She's at the Visual Perception Laboratory in Liverpool. And about a dozen or 15 years ago, she decided to look at this very thing. And she had this idea that we may be deluded into thinking that we know more about objects in our world than we really do. Or as any artist I know would put it, well, duh. That's why we need reference photos for freaking everything. So she devised a little experiment, and what she did is she called it was clever, that she called it the study of psychology, with this, like a bicycle psychology, not a PSY. And so she gave them this basic framework, and she said, I want you to add like the rest of the bicycle frame and the pedals and the chain. And people tried. And not many people were good at it. Now, they did not do well. These are some of the examples now, but she gave this to about 200 people, and she kind of varied how she did it, which I'll explain. She said, all you have to do is fill in the parts, and people were doing very badly. And she said, okay, well, I'll explain that I don't care about how well you can draw. This is not a drawing test. I just want you to do something that would work in the real world. And again, didn't help. She thought, okay, I'll make it easier for them. I will give them a multiple choice. So she said, all you have to do is circle which one is right. They still did badly. Now, how badly did they do? Let me see here. Like half of them, the non-cyclists, because she amped it up and she gave it to people who ride really like all the time and fix their own bicycles. But among the people who just bicycled every once in a while and owned a bike, almost half of them couldn't get the frame or the chain correct. And for the multiple choice, it actually went up for the people with the frame. So then she gave it to cyclists, people who, again, fix their own bicycles on the side of the road all the time. And they had more of an engineer's understanding. And they were able to reproduce the drawing, reproduce the bicycle. What she did then is she brought in a bicycle and she said, okay, here's a bicycle, everybody draw it. And the drawings increased their accuracy greatly. They went up to about what the accuracy rate of the professional cyclists was. Now, the point to me of this experiment was not that, wow, we've learned people don't know what a bicycle looks like. I knew people didn't know what a bicycle looked like. What struck me was how quickly the people came to understand it. And she took some quotes from some of her subjects, and this is my favorite one. I never knew how little I knew about things until I had to draw them. And there's no like ego. Her identity was not wrapped up in whether or not she could draw a bicycle. It was just kind of like, oh, yeah, my brain doesn't work. Isn't that funny? I can't draw this thing. And somebody actually, this is a tweet I read this past week, and I'm like, damn it, I just did a whole talk about this, and I could have just tweeted that. So my point is, if you want to teach people about their assumptions, about their psychology, about Dunning-Kruger, about how quickly you can be fooled, about the limits of your own intuition and knowledge, it might not require a ton of skeptical overview. You maybe just could hand them a pencil. Thank you. And this is me. This is my stuff. I do a podcast called Scoring the Strange, and I have swag. If anybody wants ribbons or buttons or stickers, come on up here. And if you have any questions, I think I've got about 10 minutes to take questions. If anybody
Questions.
has
We have
any
a microphone here in the middle aisle. Please don't touch it, but we would love to have some questions. So, you know what? I was going to make a the Katie Coleman. Celestia was one of the other Barbies in the car yesterday, and Katie really took a shine to her. I was so excited to have that opportunity. So we have the microphone. I went to Amsterdam and did the Van Gogh. There was like this watercolor or not watercolor, but like a painting class where we were doing the still lifes things. Mm-hmm. And it was really hard.
Yes, yeah.
Really hard. And I had a little bit of artistic training, not a lot, but a little. And my mother had a degree in art history, put herself through college by doing paintings. And she turned out a very nice painting, but it's been a long time. And then her thing is hanging on my wall now. Is that a question? Yeah. Yay.
Yeah.
You mentioned the AI stuff earlier at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And I'm of the opinion, it was a great talk, by the way, that people want to support people and not so much computers. And so things like art and writing and things like that will always find an audience with creators because, yeah. But
I firmly agree with you.
I also wonder, just as a kind of it's the people who have the most to gain from something like that are probably corporations, people who don't have to hire artists or things like that. But do you think that's also just maybe a sort of corporate Dunning-Kruger? Like they have this new tool and they think they're really good at it, and maybe it's not as effective as they think.
It's really interesting. I've been inundated by opinions about AI, and I've formed a few of my own. What I have been amazed at is how quickly the public, the average person, has developed the ability, probably not even consciously, to pick out an AI drawing. And immediately, again, I work for a PR and communications firm. Immediately, if you use an AI-generated drawing for your advertisement, for your event, for your client, you look cheap. You immediately cheapen your brand. And again, people I know who are caricature artists were like, oh, they're not going to need us anymore. Now I go and I work at a thing and people are like, you're just drawing by hand? And sometimes I draw on a tablet and I do digital work and they're like, you're not, it's not rendering or any, you're just drawing that. And it becomes a real interesting thing to them. But yeah, as far as, I think I'm losing the train of your question there, just in terms of who's going to use this, the corporations and whatnot. I think many corporations will and have, and many corporations have been burned by it already. I'm sure you've read all the news about, like, oh, my favorite was the chocolate factory one. Do you guys remember the chocolate factory one in Scotland? Ooh. Boy, did they get burned. And that was one of the ones that came into the public view. And so now when you see an image like that, advertising, I mean, and I do it. I look and I'm like, oh, what event am I going to go to this weekend? Oh, there's a dance party thing. Oh, they're using an AI thing. That's going to be 3 people in a broom closet. That's going to be a terrible event. I don't go. If I see an AI image, it's just like a warning thing. It's like seeing a glamour shot on somebody's dating profile. You're like, yeah, you're not a real person. I'm not going to, yeah. But I hope I answered your question. Okay.
Thank you for that talk. So I teach science at a community college, and one of the things I try to explain to students, I'm not sure what they hear or how they hear it, but it's the idea that as you learn about something, the feeling isn't that you're mastering it. You become more and more aware of what you don't know, and so there's a correlation with true mastery and less feeling of confidence, and that's actually a good thing, right? Trust it.
Yeah.
And I've noticed, I don't know if it's perfect in science, but most of the time, the more people tend to know, the more actually the more you're likely to say, I'm not sure, waffle, to qualify your answers and stuff. So in art, my question is, in art, do you notice, I mean, obviously there was the Degas quote, does it map on to, or in other words, are better artists more uncomfortable with what they, a feeling of mastery?
Well, there's sort of a dichotomy here, because there's art as a business, and there's art as like the pursuit of pure mastery of art. And I know people who walk the line on both. I know people who are like, God, I just can't get that nose right. Oh God, and then I made this line and it was just terrible. And these are people who are painting the cover of Time magazine. And they're like, I really hate how, I wrecked it with that, and then I had to redo it. But meanwhile, they also understand their business, part of their mind is like, I've been doing this for 30 years. I am worth the money I'm charging. I'm confident enough to market myself. But when I talk to my artist friends, I'm like, God, look at how this sucks, And I don't think I should have done that. What do you think, And so there is this tenuous, like, there's a lot of artists with egos, but from what I have seen, the people who are absolutely sure, like, this is the best. My mother was a technical illustrator, and when I was like 7, I drew a horse, and I remember thinking, like, this is the best horse that anybody has ever drawn in the history of equine art. And I took this to my mom, and I was like, look, it's perfect. Because I had gotten the hoof right or something. And I remember what she said. She said, oh, well, you just can't see the things I see. And she wasn't trying to be mean. I don't need to go to therapy over my mother. But and I remember she sees differently than I do. You just don't see the things I see. And learning how to see is all about it. So as a scientist, you're going to see like all these different aspects of the problem, and you're not even going to be sure of anything. That's why you have sigma levels instead of like, this is right. And then you got this other dope bringing a snowball to the floor of Congress saying, there's no climate change. Look, it still snows. So yeah, there's definitely, thank you for pointing out that parallel.
I also want to thank you for the comment about engineering and imagination. I didn't get through my PhD with math and sigma levels. I hated it. But it was pattern matching for me. I was going like, this thing here looks like this thing here. And it was creativity, right? And that's something that people don't get. And so they don't go into science because they think, oh, I'm not good at science and math.
My math SATs were very high. Were a lot higher than my English scores.
Yeah, me too.
But I work in English now. I work in writing and art, so.
Yeah. We have another question?
The mic should
will come to you.
It should come to you. Okay.
Just a comment. Your talk was real wonderful for me, and it reminded me of something that when I took my first course at the University of Georgia in art, and the teacher said, you can look at something, but you don't see it till you draw it.
Yes. Yeah. You've got to. Yeah. And in the 60s, I of course didn't go to art school in the 60s, but my mother did, and so I did hear some of what the art approach was. And there she said you would just do these contour drawings where you would look and you would move your hand like you were little ants going over the surface, like you were like scanning it like an MRI, and it's just a different way to get the data into your head. And Tom Richmond, he would say, I've been to countless of his. He trains all over the country, and I'm his friend, and I won the bet over how many copies of his book would sell. So he lets me just go, and I just still absorb things from when he does these seminars. And he said, if somebody can't draw a circle, I can teach them how to draw a circle. But that's not the problem. The problem is they look at a circle and they see a square. So, yeah. Well, who wants swag?
Would you talk a bit about your podcast before you start giving out the swag for the podcast?
I do a podcast with Ben Radford, who's how many books has he written now? 13, 14? He's written
He helped start the Skeptrack.
He helped found the Skeptrack with Derek, and he's my co-host. Pascual Romero is also a co-host. He's not on as much because he's a busy guy, like playing heavy metal rock.
Yeah, because you're not busy.
I'm a little bit
Seriously,
busy.
this is the busiest woman I think I've ever met.
But the podcast is like every 2 weeks we drop an episode and we talk skeptically, but I am an artist, Pascual is a musician, and Ben is a nerd writer. So we come at it from a lot of different angles, and we talk about everything from cryptids to cognitive biases to everything. So we had an episode on penis theft. It's a thing. It's a thing in Africa
It's a belief, yeah.
It's the thing where people wake up and they think their penis has been stolen. There's a kind of like a hysteria, mass sociogenic illness, and cultural belief aspect to it. And apparently when they ask the guy, like, no, your penis is still there. It hasn't been stolen by a witch or a wizard. They say, oh, no, this is not mine. This one is a lot smaller than the one I had. And I'm saying it in a funny way, but you can look it up. It is a thing that happens.
Yeah, I love how you looked at me like I don't have them. I don't have them. But those beliefs are very upsetting to the person who has them.
Yes.
Like we see psychiatric patients in the emergency department with really strange delusions, and you just have to. God, that life just must be horrible to live with that belief. So. Anyway, all right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get all philosophical. Anyway,
all right. Well, we're over
thank
the time.
you so much for joining us here on the Skeptrack. Thank Celestia Ward. We'll see you later.
And I'll just dump some swag here. If anybody wants to come on up, you can have some swag of it.